Welcome to the Brand and Market Podcast, where branding clarity meets marketing strategy. I'm your host, Allie Haney, founder of Brand and Market, a boutique agency dedicated to helping small businesses craft intentional brands and effective marketing plans. Each week, I share practical tips and insights to help you, especially those of you in real estate-related industries, build a standout brand to attract your brand's biggest fans. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. I'm your host, Allie Haney. Today, we are doing something that we have not done since August, and that is a client case study. The last client case study we did, we got a lot of great feedback on. That was the Tennessee Together property in the mountains of Pigeon Forge. And so today we are going to pull another client case study and go into all of the brand strategy behind the brand visuals that we created for another client. This client is very special to me. I have known her since I was 12 years old, and that client is my mother-in-law. So I co-host her home in Central Virginia for her and have been doing so for almost 3 years now. And that property is a property that I know very, very well because I basically grew up in it. I have memories of this property from when I was in high school and I was dating Caleb, to coming over before cross country meets to do spaghetti dinners at her house and carb load the night before an invitational. So it's just been really special to me throughout the years. And when she decided to Airbnb it, I was very excited and grateful that she asked me to co-host it for her. I feel like this project holds a special place in my heart and gives me even more insight into the person who owns it, the host, as well as the experience it can give guests. So without further ado, let's dive into the brand strategy and the brand visuals behind the Homestead at Cunningham Creek. So first, I want to dive into the story of how it got its name. I asked my mother-in-law if she had any names that she thought perhaps it could be. And they had sort of like toyed around with a property name when they first bought the property back in 2005, so 20 years ago. But they never like officially called the house anything. It was always to us just the house on Slater's Ford. It was fun to kind of deep dive into the options that they had in the past, but also crowdsource options from my audience on Instagram who didn't know much about the house other than the fact that, some of the specs of the house. It's on 15 acres. It has 5 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, multiple living areas. On the 15 acres, it has this beautiful creek that runs behind the house that you can see from the double porches. There's an upstairs porch and a downstairs porch on the back of the house, especially in the like late summer, early fall. Like it's just so peaceful out there on those back porches. And then the other main thing about the 15 acres is that they have chickens, and they are pretty much free range. They go and collect the eggs every morning from the chickens. And so it's essentially a farm stay. In the past, they've had goats, they've had horses, they've had llamas. None of those are there now, but overall, it is definitely a rural, scenic, beautiful, pastoral scene. So as we were thinking of a name and we were crowdsourcing from people that didn't know much about the property other than what I just told you, they immediately started using the word homestead. I thought that was perfect because it allowed for growth. It didn't like pigeonhole us into only having chickens. Like a lot of the names that we were getting were like had to do with roosters or eggs or chickens. And I was like, okay, that's a little bit too niche, because if ever there was a time that they decided they didn't want to have chickens anymore, they would be stuck with this name. So the homestead allowed for growth. It allowed for evolution. And that was one of the main reasons that I really liked that word to be part of the title. And then, of course, the second half of the title, at Cunningham Creek. Cunningham Creek is that beautiful creek that I mentioned that runs behind the back of the house. So it was a geographical marker as well as a description of the land. So people, when they book, they know exactly what to expect. They're going to be on a creek and they're going to be on a homestead, which is most typically a farm stay. So I love that it has that kind of like sentimentality. It has the ability to evolve depending on what their wants and needs for the property are. And it has a very like clear geographical signal from that's on the property, the creek itself. I ran a few names by her. I actually have a video that I have never posted on social media, but absolutely need to. It has me running all of the names by her and her reactions to all of them. There was like a couple that were like Oak and Ember Acres. One was Whiny Chicks Cottage. And I'll tell you the reason behind that one. So in Central Virginia, they have a very large concentration of wineries right there along the like Jefferson Trail. And so this house is like 3 miles from the closest winery, but it also is within like a 20-mile radius of like 40 wineries. I would say probably 30 to 40% of the people that are coming, they are coming specifically to go to the wineries. I'll break down a little bit more about our ideal guest in a second, but just wanted to give you some context on why that name was suggested. Like I mentioned, there were a couple of other like chicken specific ones. So like Creekside Coop, the Country Coop, Creek and Coop. I think people were probably using ChatGPT when they put the suggestions in the suggestion box. So we got like a little honed in on the chicken theme. And like I said, I don't want to pigeonhole ourselves into that. Another was Feather and Fern that also had a nod to the chickens. The Homestead at High Creek, I guess because I had mentioned at some point that the creek does get high occasionally, but its actual name is Cunningham Creek. So we went with that. And then a couple of names had to do with like the geographical like mailing address. So they live in Palmyra, Virginia. So it was like the Grove at Palmyra or the Palmyra House. I just felt like that was a little bit too revealing to the general public. I say that. I see the irony in this that I'm going on a public podcast and saying that, but I just didn't want that to be like permanently associated with the house. So we went with the homestead at Cunningham Creek, and she agreed that that was a great fit for all of the reasons that I just listed. So the second thing I want to talk about, now that we know what the property's name is and why it was named that way, I want to dive into a couple of brand themes. Anytime you hear somebody discuss branding, almost immediately people think of the brand visuals, the logo, the color palette, the fonts and typography. And yes, those are important. But first, we have to focus on the fact that all of that, those brand visuals, are intended to make someone feel a certain type of way. So, first, I want to figure out how we want our guests to feel when they step onto property, when they first encounter the property, perhaps online on our direct booking site, on Airbnb, because those feelings are going to be what leads people to book before they even know what that logo looks like. Let's dive into a couple of the brand themes that I wanted to evoke and carry through as through lines throughout this entire brand, from the marketing materials down to the branding visuals, down to the guest experience and the interior design of this property. The heart of the brand was I really wanted it to be like any family that was coming there was going to be living out their own version of the good old days. And again, because I know this client so well, she's my mother-in-law and I've known her since I was 12. I know that the good old days is always something that she talks about. They're one of the cousins in my daughter's, like our kids' generation. He asked her once to tell him a story about the good old days. And so she would tell them a story, all of the cousins, a story about her childhood, about her parents, their great grandparents. And so now it's become a tradition that whenever, they're all together, they always want to hear stories about Izzy's good old days. Izzy is what we call her. I wanted there to be themes of nostalgia. I knew there wanted to be themes of connection and warmth and just genuine relationship building. In order to do that, I wanted to create a space where people could create their own good old days stories. Like I'm thinking, our generation that has young kids, us millennials, I want our kids to be making their own good old days. I want us to be making our own good old days. Like when we're 70, 80 years old, telling the story about, oh my gosh, do you remember that trip where we stayed at that Airbnb and they had that awesome creek with like a random tube tied to the bank where the kids could just play all day? Do you remember that? Those were the good old days. And so that was the type of mentality, the type of vibe that I wanted to bring into all of the brand visuals. I wanted it to be like you were staying at grandma's house. And even that portion of the brand theme is going to be brought into the brand visuals and the interior design. Overall, when people attend or come to rent out this property, I just want them to feel comfort and belonging, kind of like you did whenever you went to your grandma's house when you were a kid. With that being said, I also wanted it to feel a little bit more modern, and I am very grateful that right now it's a little bit trendy to have the like grandma chic, cottage core, vintage type of vibe in your house. So that is what we were going to go for interior design to really evoke that emotion of nostalgia, belonging, feeling, and connection. Now let's move into who we were actually trying to attract with this brand. Who was our ideal guest avatar? And I will say that we kind of had a leg up on this one because when we first started the Airbnb at her house, she didn't know how she was going to like it. A little bit of backstory, they still live in the bottom floor of this house. So it's a 3-story home. They live in the basement. They have their own dedicated entrance and exit. So whenever the guests are there, they really don't see them unless the guests want to see them. They weren't sure that this was going to be something that they wanted to pursue long term. They just kind of wanted to try it out, which is why we didn't go all in on the brand when they first started. However, now we have about 2.5 years worth of data to know what guests are already naturally attracted to this property based off of its specs, the 5-bed, 3.5 bath, farm stay, rural type of vibe that's near wineries, near wedding venues, near Charlottesville, which is the home of UVA, University of Virginia. So we had kind of a context already of who was just automatically gravitating towards there without any type of brand strategy or brand work. Some of those types of guests, I would split them up into 3 categories. The first category is like the extended family that's coming and using this as a central location to meet. In fact, we have one family, I think this 2026 will be their 4th year that they come for like a family reunion. It's not a huge family reunion. It's like 12 people, which is our max guest count at that property. But they come every single year. We are a central location. And funny enough, they actually used to come to the same county every single year, but that house got sold, so they could no longer use it annually. But whenever they went to that previous home, they would go to a theme park, an amusement park. There's King's Dominion near Richmond, Virginia. And so they would meet at this central location, but then go to the amusement park, ride the roller coasters, do all the things, and then come back to the house. Since they have moved or migrated their annual trip to my mother-in-law's house, the Homestead at Cunningham Creek, they no longer leave the house. They're like, this house is so perfect for us. And it's so peaceful that we don't even see the need to go out and have another experience. We experience enough here and love the connection that we have with our family. So that's a really special piece of feedback that gives us insight into what kind of experiences and overall brand vibe that we can get from this property. First ideal guest avatar is the extended family using this as a central location to meet. The second guest avatar is, again, extended family, but coming for a different reason, like a wedding. We have lots of wedding guests. Sometimes we've had like bridesmaids get ready there. We've had groomsmen get ready there. We've had mothers and fathers of the bride or mother and fathers of the groom coming. So again, extended family coming in. And then the final one, we've had a couple of bachelorette parties that are, I guess when you think of bachelorette parties, I think of like downtown Nashville on Broadway getting kind of sloppy. That's actually not the type of bridesmaids that we attract. We attract like 30 to 35-year-old brides that just want to go to the wineries and have a peaceful weekend. So those are the main 3 guest avatars. And I guess 2 of those 3 really kind of combine or condense down to being extended family. That's who I really wanted to cater to, is that multi-generational stay where they're coming with maybe the grandmas, grandpas, the moms and dads, and then the grandchildren. And that again brings us back to this cohesive brand of living out your good old days. Like you could be coming just to celebrate a holiday. You could be coming for your annual family reunion. You could be coming for a significant family event like a wedding. I really wanted to tailor the entire brand around that extended family guest avatar. Ways that we did this is that we have truly family-friendly design within the actual architecture of the home. My in-laws built this home in 2005. They designed it themselves. One of the main things that my mother-in-law wanted to design this house for was for her grandchildren. So keep in mind, in 2005, Caleb is 34 now, so that was 20 years ago. This is when he was 14. So his brother was 15 and his sister was 6. When she built this house, when her kids were teenagers, she built it with her grandchildren, future grandchildren in mind. So I'm going to try and do my best to give you a lay of the land. I can link the Airbnb and link as well as the direct booking link in the show notes just so you guys can see what it looks like in the actual professional photographer photos. But when you first walk into the side door, there is a great room that's a living room and a kitchen with an island. And we always call that like the safe island. So when you sit at the island, you can say anything you need to say. And then once you leave the island, like it's done. Like you've said your piece and it's over. So that's just a fun little piece of family, family fun fact, lore. I don't know. Like I said, I know this property really well. So then if you keep going through the swinging door, you have a dining room. You keep going through another doorway and there's another living room. That is like a big circle down a hallway on the other side by the front of the house. So when she built that, she wanted her grandkids to just run laps around this house, through the dining room, through 2 living rooms, through the kitchen. And I kid you not, whenever she closes down the Airbnb in December so that we can all come back for Christmas and New Year's, every single time without fail, the cousins, it is like a racetrack in there. They will be having races. They will be playing hide and seek. It will be tag. It will be Nerf guns. It is just absolute chaos. And that is what she thrives in. It's why she built the house. So when I say we have truly family friendly design, it was planned to be that way. And then one of the other things that I love is that one of the bedrooms, or excuse me, 2 of the bedrooms share like a Jack and Jill bathroom. So it makes it really easy for like a family with older children to be able to still have their privacy while condensing the space that they take by, being able to share a bathroom with their parents and still be able to like lock the doors and stuff. So when I say it's truly family friendly, it very much is. Another thing that differentiates us from the rest of the homes in our market is that scenery. The scenery of the creek, the scenery of the chicken coop, the scenery of the beautiful magnolia tree in the middle of the circle gravel driveway. I think because my in-laws still live there, they're able to see how guests interact with the property. Their kids from Richmond, Virginia, or coming from like Northern Virginia, we call it Nova, or DC, or, Charlotte or Raleigh. Like they're coming from cities around to Charlottesville for a family event, for a wedding. They're seeing the country for the first time. Like some of the kids that come to the homestead, they're walking in the creek barefoot for the first time, feeling cold creek water flowing over their toes and like rocks on the bottom of their feet. They are seeing bugs for the first time, seeing chickens for the first time because we let them go and explore the chicken coop and everything. So they're able to go and interact with them. And it's fun for my mother-in-law to be able to see people experience that for the first time. And I absolutely think that differentiates us. And beyond the interaction with the chickens in the chicken coop, we also supply fresh eggs for their stay upon request. So that is one thing that absolutely differentiates us from another stay in the immediate area. It's one of the things that we've gotten the most positive feedback on are the fresh eggs. And people, it's kind of funny because fresh eggs are so different than store-bought eggs. The shells, they crack a little bit easier, so it's easier to get like shells inside of your scrambled eggs or whatever. They're a little bit harder to boil or peel after you boil them. So it's funny to like see people experience truly fresh, free-range eggs for the first time. Just, all boils down to the guest experience. And we wanted to embody all of that in the branding that we created for this property. One other thing that differentiates us that I didn't necessarily bring into the brand, but it's definitely an amenity strategy that very few rentals around us have, is that we have a hot tub on that one of those back porches, and that hot tub is off onto like a jut out of the porch. So that's the only thing that's out there on that section, and it overlooks the creek. So it's just absolutely serene, beautiful, gorgeous, peaceful. You look up, you see the stars. it's great all year round. Like so fun in the summer, so wildly cold in the winter, but it's a great experience and also a differentiator in terms of the amenity strategy. So, this is bringing us into some of the interior design of the house and how we're incorporating the overall brand theme of the good old days and nostalgia, having a good time at your grandma's house into the actual design of the home. So, I mentioned earlier we were very lucky that cottagecore and grandma chic are really in right now. So, we were wanting to bring that in as well as like this kind of like old school old money winery, Virginia hunt country. There's lots of horses around us. Like, wanted to kind of marry those two to take the cottage core and elevate it just a little bit. So, within the color palette, I'm going to kind of jump ahead because this also has to do with the brand visuals. But within the color palette, we had some darker blues, a forest green, as well as some very like warm neutrals, all the way to like a light peach type of color. As I was creating this color palette, I wanted it to be a little bit muted, a little bit faded, just to kind of evoke that sense of old and a little worn in, a little vintage, but also incorporate some of the decor that she already had in the home. Because remember, this has been running as an Airbnb for a successful Airbnb for 2.5 years. And so we didn't want to do like a full interior redesign. And so I took some of that inspiration of what she already had in the home and pulled it into the new brand visuals. Next up is some of the decor decisions. We have the 3 living rooms, all for gathering. I mentioned the 2 living spaces that were downstairs, one connected to the kitchen, one's like a dedicated living room with a TV. And then there is also another living space upstairs that is definitely much more oriented to the kids. So the kids are able to have their own space without, I don't want to say bothering is not the right word, but able to independently play while the parents might be downstairs having a glass of wine, watching a football game, or doing like playing cards around the dining room table, which is something that often happens when we go home for Christmas. So that's some of the things that we brought into the interior design, as well as one of the patterns that we pulled from the brand visuals, which is the scalloped edges. Think like your grandma's old like handkerchief, like the edges of that. That is what I wanted to like embody and pull to repeat that pattern subtly throughout the interior design of the house, as well as the actual brand visuals, which we incorporated in the icon. Okay, like I said, I am jumping ahead of myself. So let's go ahead and dive into some of the brand visuals and what the design decisions were behind these. So, like I mentioned, the name of the property is the Homestead at Cunningham Creek. And the Homestead at that font is a serif font, and it's actually a heavy serif font. And the Cunningham Creek words or typography is in a vintage script font. And I picked that vintage script font for a very specific reason. I want you to imagine going to church when you were a little kid. And then I want you to imagine that it is Christmas time and you get handed a card from 80-year-old Mabel, who sits in the same pew every single Sunday. What does that handwriting look like? I know you know exactly what I'm talking about. And that is the handwriting or the script font that I chose for Cunningham Creek because I wanted it to evoke like classic grandma, good old days, vintage nostalgia. That is the design decisions behind picking the typography and font for the actual logo itself. And I know I'm explaining with words what a visual looks like, but the Homestead at is curved over top and Cunningham Creek is in a straight line at the bottom. And in between that arch, as well as that straight line of Cunningham Creek, we have in smaller font EST 2005, established 2005, which is when the house was built. And in the very middle, it is a magnolia flower because they have a beautiful magnolia tree as soon as you drive up in the center of the circled teardrop driveway. And so I wanted to kind of prime them for the experience they were going to have once they actually came onto property with that magnolia flower. I've already touched on the color palette and why I wanted it to be a little muted or faded. And that is really just to evoke the bring in the existing decor and evoke the sense of vintage nostalgia. Last thing I want to touch on is I mentioned this already. Some of the interior design has scalloped edges. For example, the master bedroom has a rug that has scalloped edges, and I incorporated that into the icon of the actual brand visuals. I want you to think, like I said, your grandmother's hanky. We incorporated that scallop pattern not only into the brand visuals, but also into the website. So, as you transition from section to section of the website, there are certain sections that have those scalloped edges. And that might seem insignificant, but the cohesion and the consistency across the brand visuals, across the website, across the in person experience with the interior design once they approach the property, that is what solidifies, that consistency is what solidifies the brand in the guest's head. And that's what you want when they are coming back to be repeat guests. That's what you want when they are trying to refer you, that you want your brand to be as memorable as possible. So I will link in the show notes some of the blog posts that kind of goes through all of exactly what I just said today, but also gives you actual visuals that you can see that we have implemented at the homestead at Cunningham Creek. I'm going to do a little bit of a bonus segment. This is off the cuff. I think I told you in one of my previous episodes, I almost always outline my episodes, but this is not even in the outline. I would love to talk to you about how to incorporate your brand visuals throughout your property so that you can use them, implement them, and again, create that consistency and awareness of your brand. Anytime I create a brand visual for a client, especially their primary logo, I will always put it on a welcome mat directly outside of the door. So the homestead at Cunningham Creek has a welcome mat outside the front door with their primary logo on it. So as soon as the guest unloads their car and walks across the threshold, they're already seeing that logo. Another place you can put it, of course, is in your welcome book. You can get a personalized guest book. You can get a personalized guidebook that you have designed specifically for your rental using your colors, your fonts, your logos. You can buy coffee mugs with your logos on them. I have seen some owners, operators, co hosts create water bottle labels for their water bottles that they leave for guests with their logos. And one of the fun things that I do, not at this property specifically, but I do at one of our other properties in Kentucky called the Commonwealth, I leave postcards out in each individual room with a stamp already on it so that they can write a postcard to a friend or a loved one that has our brand visuals on it, our logo on it. And that way, they're spreading the word. It's a fun experience. It reinforces the brand. And so those are just a few very low hanging fruit ways to be able to incorporate your brand visuals once you have them. So to recap the process, we first named the property. We tied some emotion to the property. We figured out who we wanted our ideal guest to be on this property. And then we figured out what differentiated the property, our UVP or unique value proposition. We then took all of that and created those brand visuals that we now incorporate into the guest experience, both through actual marketing materials like the guidebook, guest book, as well as interior design elements like that scalloped rug or the welcome mat at the front door. So, one thing that I just want you to reflect on as you are building your brand for your property, I just want you to think about the story that's going to be behind it. I want you to experience the property as if you were a guest for the first time. And I want you to think about the feelings that you want to evoke for that guest. How do you want that guest to feel when they leave? How do you want that guest to feel when they arrive? How do you want that guest to feel before they arrive? Think about each one of those junctures in the guest experience. And once you're clear on that, that will start to give you more clarity on where you should go for your brand visuals. I would love for you to follow us on social media. So if you want to follow my own account, which anytime I'm working with a co-hosted property, I always collaborate on my account with that, their own specific social media account. You can find me at brandandmarket.co, brandandmarket.co. And if you want to follow along specifically with the homestead at Cunningham Creek, you can follow them at Homestead at CC. I will link their Instagram in the show notes as well. And I would love to work with you creating a brand for your property, for your micro resort, or for your boutique hotel, walking through the exact brand strategy steps that I outlined in this episode to create a beautiful, cohesive, and consistent, memorable brand for your business. I'm going to also link, you got a lot of links in the show notes today. I'm going to also link to my calendar, my call calendar. I offer free 30-minute consult calls. And honestly, if I'm being totally transparent, usually those calls end up being 40 to 45 minutes because I just love talking to owners and co-hosts. Book a free consult call if creating a brand is on your radar for 2026. I would love to chat with you. And until next time, holy moly, next time I talk to you, it's going to be next year. So talk to you next year. Have a happy new year. You just completed another episode of the Brandon Market Podcast. If you found this helpful, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find this show and so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for all the resources mentioned today. See you next Wednesday, and as always, I'm here cheering you on as you build your dream brand and business.